Welcome. This is Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute, a weekly edition focused on Mideastern intricacies from an American, European, and Israeli perspective. Today, we will talk more deeply about the various challenges at hand, particularly the war against Islamist Hamas terror organization and its affiliates in the Gaza Strip. Where is currently the war versus this organization? Where are we going from here to contend also with Iran, its proxies, nuclear proliferation, and more? For that, we have with us a former senior researcher at Hudson Institute, who subsequently served as Israel's national security advisor and a Mossad division chief, Dr. Uzi Arad. It's good to see you, sir. When you currently map out the situation throughout the Middle East, what is the chief concern and the chief focus that leaders today must focus on?
Well, I think the effort is by a number of countries involved is to stabilize the situation in Gaza, leading to a possible cessation of hostilities, paralleled by an effort to close the kidnapped exchange or return of those kidnapped. This has been given priority, and the diplomacy about that has to do with who will do what to undertaking certain responsibilities as to what situation will prevail on the ground, so that there would be no escalation on one hand or some kind of disruptions of the process. At the same time, there's still action going on in the north, which is related to the one in the south, that is to say, in Lebanon. And in there is an effort also to stabilize the situation so that there would be a cessation of the exchanges. And at the same time, those Israelis who had to evacuate certain areas could return safely to their homes.
Thank you, Dr. Uzi Arad. I'd like now to turn to Madrid, Spain, where we're joined by Dr. Rafael Barraji, formerly a Spanish national security advisor, currently the CEO of Worldwide Strategy. It's good to see you, sir. I'd like to ask you from your perspective right now, from a strategic level, how do we deal with different intricacies at a time when we see on the one hand the Islamic Republic of Iran, assisted by China, assisted by Russia, posing concrete challenges, not only to Israel, but to the United States and the Western world at large?
Well, I think we need to go back to the basics. And I understand the basic as something very simple. What Israel is doing now in Gaza is not just fighting a military organization, a terror army like Hamas, is fighting an idea. Not an ideology, the Islamism is an idea, the idea that many Palestinians embrace today, which is that Israel should not exist any longer. And those who are chanting from the river to the sea is what Israel is fighting, really. So if we understand that's a vital existential fight and that Israel represents the Western values in the region, I think the major powers should undertake a different policy and really embrace all the efforts, military and political, that Israel should develop in order to achieve a clear-cut victory, which we are not seeing that. And that relates also to Israel. The American administration is still open to negotiate in secret talks with Tehran, just to embrace a Tehran that may be a regional power. But an Iranian Islamist, revolutionary, and potentially nuclear power in the region will not only affect the Gulf of Israel, the Levant, it will affect Europe, and at the end of the world today, the whole Western world. No? So I think we need to be very cautious on what we are planning and seeing in the coming months. And we need to understand that this is a basic civilizational struggle. If not, probably we will have in place the wrong strategies.
Indeed. Also joining our discussion is Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, formerly an Israeli Air Force commander, a fighter pilot, as well as the IDF cyber chief of staff. It's very good to see you, General. I'd like to also ask you from both theaters, first the Gaza Strip and the struggle versus the Islamic Republic of Iran. Where do you see the correlation between the two theaters?
Well, there's right now an operational whack-a-mole like a strategic, all the strategic setbacks, because the strategic initiatives by all players are not very effective. It really necessitates that the Israeli military goes back into Gaza City and other places in the Gaza Strip to counter Hamas's regrouping efforts. That's what we're seeing on the operational level, and it's quite interesting because we've been talking a lot about the military operations that need to be continued by diplomatic efforts, and because the diplomatic efforts are not very effective on the various fronts, and there are setbacks actually, which I will talk about in a moment. I think that this is actually prolonging the fighting and all other efforts, including the release of the hostages and putting an end to this war in all its fronts, in the south, in the north, and vis-a-vis Iran eastward. And I think the stance that the United States has taken lately, mainly in simple words, the administration is coercing Israel by discussing halting arms supply to Israel if it does not act as the administration wishes to in relation to the operation in Rafah. So take out the Hamas without Rafah. Now, if you understand just a little about this, and this is just unexplainable. There's no way to explain this. Or maybe there is a way to explain this. It's a realpolitik, maybe, in relation to the politics in the United States. And that's very saddening, because the way the United States now is playing out to actually helping the Hamas's cause. And again, it's counterproductive to the United States, prolonging the discussions on hostages and all the rest, and actually damaging the United States' credibility again in the Middle East. I think Dr. Arad spoke of that. And again, it's just saddening to see how the United States again and again makes these mistakes in the region, not understanding the wider implications of dealing with Israel in that sense, and how it wants to change its decisions by arms supply. So again, everything is connected to everything, and basically what I'm seeing now, bottom line, I think the Iranian axis right now is gaining momentum, both on the diplomatic level, informational warfare, very successful, and these two are really preventing the physical, operational battlefront efforts, bringing them to an end. It's just an ongoing facade that we're seeing here, from my point of view.
Very alarming indeed, Dr. Arad. Does the Biden administration not understand the implications of withholding weaponry from Israel at a time when we hear British Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron coming out in an interview to the BBC and saying that doing so from a British perspective would be counterproductive to basically the war against Hamas, would support Hamas, would also distance the viability of reaching a sort of hostage release deal in exchange for a cessation of hostilities. At the same time, we're also seeing the Germans fighting on the legal battlefield at the ICJ and successfully preventing Nicaragua's attempt to frustrate its weapons shipments towards Israel. What's gone astray in Washington with regard to this reality?
Well, it's gone astray not only in Washington, but also in Israel. Because you see, what complicates the matter in many of the countries involved, Israel and America, is that in both countries, the leadership has domestic political considerations that dictate certain constraints on their behavior. We in Israel, so is the public debate going, see a leadership which is managing the campaign, not necessarily according to the best strategic considerations, but also with a heavy dose of how this will impact on their political position in Israel in light of the possibility of elections and so forth. And it is a matter of realpolitik to understand that domestic political issues involving the protagonist play a role. The same happens in America. The Biden has elections at his doorstep. He's got all kind of pressures. He has political things to take in mind, whether you like it or not. These are a matter of reality too. And also there are some other considerations that he has to factor into his conduct. And therefore, one should understand that once you work in concert and you have allies and friends, one of the manifestations of working in concertation is taking into account and understanding the domestic political circumstances that govern positions of those involved. So I would urge that the United States, of course, be attentive to Israel's interest and be supportive as it has, and it did provide support, and it does act with some degree of alliance. And we need the United States in further confrontations, those with possibly in Lebanon and certainly with Iran. And we need that kind of support, and it has to be developed. At the same time, we should take into account the political considerations that lead them sometimes to take a certain pose or some kind of action which is demonstrative more than real, and it is not to become a habit. So both parties, the big and the small, have to calibrate the positions with some degree of consideration for each other's position, and by so doing, really manage the partnership in a more effective way.
Dr. Barrahi, let's step one level higher into the sphere of strategic power competition. How is that manifested today throughout the Middle East at a time when we see deepening relations between the Russian Federation and the Islamic Republic of Iran on the one hand, and also the deepening of relations between China and the Islamic Republic? Is there a certain pressure campaign from those two actors also to further intensify hostilities throughout the region, or are they seeking to actually alleviate tensions?
Well, I think, as Henry Kissinger said, there are revolutionary powers who wants to redress the norms and the status quo of the world order, the order that was born after the Second World War, no? And those are today clearly China, Russia, and to a certain extent, Iran. And I think there is if not an alliance per se, a kind of conglomerate of interests that are bringing the three powers together in order to undermine the Western institutions and Western values, starting with American foreign policy in the region and in Europe. We are seeing the Russians attempt since the Ukrainian invasion in 2022, and we are seeing that now with this closer link with Iran, because of the needs of the Russian to get enough quantity of drones to be used in Ukraine, and the Chinese economic interest and energy interest in the region, so bringing them closer to Iran as well. But I think the problem is not what they want to achieve, because they want to promote their interest. The problem is that we are seeing a kind of abdication of the American policy in the region, and we don't see any emerging leadership in Europe that is aware of the stakes in the regional arena. And also we have an Israel society that is deeply divided in the last 2 years, and now entangled in the fighting with Hamas and defending from the north in Hezbollah and reacting to, for the first time, a direct attack from Iran. So the situation is an explosive cocktail, and it's not going in the right direction in favoring our own interests, I'm afraid. No?
And General Rosen, I'd like to hear your perspective on that. And to what degree do you expect there to be a change of an equation versus Iranian proxies throughout the region, with chief focus on the Lebanese front with Hezbollah?
Yeah, I think, because of the complexity of the situation, both on the strategic level and operational level, the only way out of such complexities is a big deal, like something that changes completely the equation. And I think in that sense, the lack of strategic initiatives that bring new, if you will, new ideas that can change and counter the Iranian offensive westwards, is the biggest thing that is lacking right now on the playground. And when I say lack of initiatives, of such initiatives, I would say that if the goal, the overarching goal of the Iranian axis is to eliminate Israel, as we clearly understand, from the river to the sea, if Israel needs something more than anything in the near future and in the long term as well, is recognition of its final borders for the next centuries, decades, and centuries. And if we put that in place, along with a widening of the Abrahamic Accords, I think that Israel will be able to regain its strategic position, sort of. And from there, we could move forward to somehow settle this huge conundrum, which seems like nothing can solve it. And it's out there, but we just need to find out how to strategically counter this westward offensive from Iran. And again, if you ask me, it's the final borders of Israel being immediately recognized along the Jordan Valley in the east, the Golan Heights, the border with Lebanon, as it was recognized when Israel pulled back. These strategic needs that Israel has can counter some of the challenges Israel has with Iran, and may somehow relieve the tensions with a wider regional conglomerate of like-minded Sunni states that can come into play and sort of change a little bit the strategic dynamics. I don't see any other way around this. That's how I see it right now.
Very interesting indeed. Dr. Arad, when Herman Kahn recruited you to Hudson back in the 70s, you obviously dealt with nuclear proliferation, a topic that is today very relevant when we're talking about the Islamic Republic of Iran. Earlier today, I spoke with an Iranian expert who highlighted to me that in the event of an attack against Iranian territory in the future, the Iranians would forgo their long or old fatwa of never to pursue nuclear weapons program, and alter that equation into the 90% proliferation and, of course, attaining nuclear weapon capability, something that both the United States, Israel, and European nations, for that matter, have come out and pledged to never allow.
Well, we do have to face that contingency very, very seriously. What is exactly the Iranian game, how they want to proceed? Will there be a breakout? Would they need a pretext to do that? They may not need one, but they have certainly certain strategic considerations to do what they want. Israel must assume, as a working assumption, that the possibility of a nuclear Iran is there. This would not be a surprise if it happens. And the question is, what would then be Israel's position? Needless to say, you can assume what Herman Kahn's advice to Israel to that case. He would probably have argued that one has to rely on deterrence, but he was the first among many to know how difficult it is to maintain deterrence. Secondly, how dangerous that situation could be, and how slippery are the contingencies that develop under a kind of a balance of terror of the kind. And Herman Kahn, contrary to his image, was a very serious man and a cautious man, mind you. He was always concerned for Israel's security, and he took a very serious position on that. But needless to say, that is the option. Israel may be facing a dilemma sooner or later. One would be whether, in seeing Iran approaching that threshold to preempt, then preemption is an option. It has been discussed. And if the philosophy of other nations is that one should not allow the Iranians to have weapons, then preemption would be in order by a coalition of nations. That effort may be still underway through other means, to delay, to postpone, to stabilize a distance between possession and not possession. There are all kinds of gradations that you can employ. But for Israel, and it has given to this much thought, the possibility of a nuclear Iran is taken into account. As Herman would have said, that this could happen as a result of bad luck, mismanagement, or anything of the kind, but we could find ourselves confronting a nuclear Iran, and presumably we have a response to that. By the way, let me quote another great statesman, Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres is also one of all kind of attitudes towards his views, which have been very elastic over the years. When he was asked a few years back, what are we to do in Israel when the Iranians keep on saying that they will destroy Israel? He simply retorted by saying, well, Iran could be destroyed too. Now, this simplistic statement coming from a man known for his peace initiatives and his more optimistic scenarios of the world, saying that Iran could be destroyed too, is not something which is negligible. And coming from Peres, it also has some degree of credibility. He knows what he's talking about. So, in essence, the possibility of Israel being destroyed does not exist independently. If it does exist, it exists in the fact that others, those who may try to cause that, will fare at least as bad.
Well, Dr. Bardaki, obviously Israel has tools, so does the United States and many European powers to confront the Iranian threat. But from an escalation dominance, if I go back to Herman Kahn's theory and the various tables or degrees that he established, I think he had 75 or 76. I'm sure Dr. Arad could correct me on that, and both could you. Where do we stand right now in that evaluation?
Well, let me express first my skepticism about the possibility of translate Herman Kahn's into the Middle East today. I think, yes, for decades, America and the Soviet Union play on the mutual assured destruction game. They deter each other because of the annihilation results of any nuclear exchange. But beyond having the same arsenals, they have also a kind of commonality in a strategic culture. They understood basically each other's interest and kind of provocation avoidance philosophy. They had channel of communication from the telephone, the red telephone, to other direct lines. They have a different system to avoid an accidental launching. They were also sharing the same concern about not being trigger happy, and those elements conform the whole nuclear deterrence. Are they present? Or they will be present in Iran? I doubt it. Who will be in charge of the red button? Who are going to decide over the nuclear targeting strategy beyond Khamenei? Are we understanding their motives? Are we understanding their philosophy? I'm not sure. So I don't think deterrence could be automatically extended to any relation with Iran, because they have a different mentality, different culture. We have seen that on April 14th. We are very happy because we deny kind of the deterrence denial, any impact or negative impact of the attack in Israel. But they were also happy because for them, just launching the attack was enough. So I think we have too much asymmetry between the strategic culture of the Western world, including Israel and Iran, and that will make much more difficult to sustain any nuclear deterrence in the long term.
General
So
Hussein,
would you argue for preemption, Rafael?
I'm always favoring preemption, yes. I mean,
Indeed.
if you are avoiding a major risk, if you are really concerned with an existential threat, I think you have to rethink how to prevent that scenario from happening.
General Hussein, last 30 seconds are yours. What should we focus on for the next week until our next edition of Deep Dive?
Taking from the last discussion, the last part of the discussion, I think that Israel and Iran through Hezbollah have been in a mutual assured destruction situation for the last 15 years. That's the problem. And that is without nuclear weapons. That's why we're seeing under the threshold tit for tat for the last fire from both sides for the last 7 months with no way out. And it shows you what happens when you are not really deterring the other side. You're actually in a mad situation per se. And this situation is mad. So what we should expect in the next few weeks, I guess, is some kind of strategic initiative. I don't know where it's going to come from. Sadly saying that, we just had the saddest memorial and independence days since Israel's inception. And I only hope with my strange optimism that somehow, someone, somewhere will come up with an idea to take us out of this conundrum and vicious cycle of violence from all sides.
General Hussein, Dr. Arad, and Dr. Bardahi, thank you so very much for your insight. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition of Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute from here in Jerusalem. Have a good day.